Well, there's growing international concern over the US military buildup in the Caribbean. The Trump administration says the US flotilla is there to target drug smugglers bringing narcotics into the United States. But America's allies, including France, have expressed concern that the campaign could escalate into a wider conflict. Venezuela's president, Nicolas Maduro, has mobilized his armed forces and accuses Donald Trump of trying to overthrow his government.
Venezuela is bracing for the worst. It's mobilizing its forces nationwide, including the army and a civilian militia, for a military exercise to counter what it calls imperial threats from the US. It follows months of Washington's airstrikes targeting boats suspected of carrying drugs in international waters, including near Venezuela. Marking a major escalation in the U.S. military buildup, the USS Gerald Ford, the world's largest aircraft carrier, has arrived with its fleet of warships and jets. Venezuela's President Nicolas Maduro remains defiant, accusing Washington of fabricating a war to remove him from power.
If we, as a republic, as a people, must go to armed struggle to defend the sacred heritage of the liberators, we must be ready to win, to triumph through the path of patriotism and courage. And I say, with the whole country, peace, peace. We want peace. We will have it, facing maximum pressure, maximum preparation.
Washington's actions have raised concern abroad, with France warning of a potential full-blown conflict.
Let's get more on this with Leopoldo Lopez. He's a Venezuelan opposition leader who was imprisoned under Nicolas Maduro's regime. He escaped and now lives in exile in Spain. Welcome to DW. Let's start with your view of this American intimidation of Venezuela.
Well, I would say that what's very clear is that this is not against Venezuela. We need to make this very clear. It's against a criminal structure that Maduro leads. Venezuelans are very clear that Nicolas Maduro for years have been the head of a criminal organization that traffics cocaine, that has been exploiting the resources of Venezuela, has been contrabanding, and it's illegitimate. For us Venezuelans, Maduro is not the legitimate president. He lost an election. Edmundo González Urrutia won the election with 70% of the vote, with all of the odds against in an autocratic regime. So the huge majority of the Venezuelan people want Maduro out, as they expressed.
They want Maduro out, but do they want him out this way? Do you welcome this American action?
Well, we have walked all the ways to produce transition to democracy. We have protested in the streets for years. We have gone to elections. We have tried diplomatic pressure. I myself was 7 years in prison for saying the truth, that Nicolas Maduro is the head of a cocaine trafficking structure that has taken over the Venezuelan state. This is not a traditional cartel that is parallel to the state structure, like the Colombia or the Mexican cartels. This is a cartel that has taken over the state structure.
All right, but I just want to be clear on whether you welcome this action by the Trump White House.
We welcome.
It's a yes or a no?
No, it's a yes. We welcome the pressure to a criminal structure that has occupied the Venezuelan territory and that has oppressed the Venezuelan people for years. And let me tell you something.
No, please, because we have a lot to get through. Do you think this action will be successful?
Well, we hope so. We hope that this leads to the possibility of transitioning to democracy. And that's not what I hope. This is what the huge majority of the Venezuelan people hope. This is what the Venezuelan people stated in the elections last year, and in the opinion polls, it's very clear the support of all of the pressure against the criminal structure that Nicolas Maduro leads.
So let me put this to you. Would a Venezuelan government, backed by an American president who has himself shown autocratic tendencies. Would that improve Venezuela's situation?
Well, that's a different discussion. We're talking about Venezuela. No, I'm not talking about the United States. I'm talking about Venezuela.
But that's the question that I've put to you. Would Venezuela be better under a government that is backed by an American president with autocratic tendencies?
Venezuela will be better off without Maduro in power. Venezuela will be better off if there is respect to the will of the Venezuelan people that want change.
But the two things don't necessarily follow, do they? Because just because Donald Trump forces Maduro out, we don't know what comes next. Because
No.
Wait.
We do know what comes next.
Let me put the scenario to you, and then if I've got it wrong, then you can correct me, right? So, what happens if this American military action encourages the military to launch a coup, and Venezuela ends up run by a military dictatorship rather than a criminal dictatorship?
But who's saying that there will be a structure that will be worse than Maduro?
That's what I'm asking. What I'm putting to you is that we don't necessarily know what would happen if Trump forces Maduro out of power. We don't know who would necessarily seize power.
We do know. We have an elected president. We elected Edmundo González Urrutia with 70% of the vote. And if the 10 million Venezuelans that are living in exile would have been able to vote, it would have been 90%. We're not talking about a slim majority that is supporting change. We're talking about the huge majority of the Venezuelan people that want change. And we have a legitimate leadership that was elected. We have the backing of that leadership that was elected by the Nobel Peace Prize, Maria Corina Machado, that should have been the candidate but was banned to run for office, and the backing of the huge majority of the Venezuelan people. Let me put it this way. Venezuela has a population of 30 million people. 10 million Venezuelans have been forced to leave our country in the past 10 years. And the root cause of that massive exodus, the largest massive exodus in the planet today, is a criminal structure that has taken over the Venezuelan state and has dominated the territory of Venezuela. So yes, what we hope for is change.
Now, lots of human rights experts have described the American strikes on suspected drug boats. They say these are extrajudicial killings. As someone who has fought for human rights in Venezuela, how do you reconcile that criticism with your support for this tougher extrajudicial action against Maduro's regime?
Venezuela has been the victim, the Venezuelan population, of massive human rights violations. And I invite all of those people that are having that opinion to read the reports of the UN Fact-Finding Commission that talks about forced disappearances, torture, killings. I have friends, my friends, that have been killed by the Maduro regime. I have friends, hundreds of them, that are today in the Venezuelan prisons. There has been thousands of victims of Maduro over the past years, people that have been killed, shot, that have been kidnapped from their homes. If they don't find them in their homes, they kidnap their families. Maduro has been occupying the will of the Venezuelan people. So I find it very curious that all of a sudden that seems to be the focus of the human rights interest when the entire population has been forced to be subject to all of the human rights violations of the Nicolas Maduro regime.
It is part of the discussion about how this plays out. And it's a legitimate part, surely. It is legitimate to question whether, given everything that you've outlined and given the outrages that have been perpetrated by the Maduro regime, is it legitimate, therefore, to force him out by... Is it legitimate to force him out by any means necessary? And you appear to be saying yes.
Well, I do believe that.
Yes.
I do believe that. And for saying that, my nationality was stripped 2 weeks ago. And by saying that, Maduro has been threatening that everybody that says that it's agreeing that we need change in Venezuela, that their nationality will be stripped out. We Venezuelans, for decades, have been fighting against this autocratic regime. And as I said before, we have tried everything. We have gone to elections. We have taken the streets, not one, but thousands of times. We have gone to negotiations with the mediation of the Vatican, of the OAS, of Norway, and Maduro stays in power. So the Venezuelan people, the main priority, the issue that unites the Venezuelan people the most is the hope that Nicolas Maduro lives. And I want to make something very clear. The Venezuelan leadership, the democratic leadership that today is represented by Edmundo González Urrutia and María Corina Machado is ready to transition to a democracy that is respectful of human rights, of free and fair elections, and to the rule of law.
So do you see this American intimidation as being Venezuela's best hope of regaining its democracy?
Well, at the moment, it is the window that it's opening. It's the crack in the wall that seems to be opening for the wall to fall.
Right.
So that's what we expect.
Except that, what if Maduro doesn't go? What if this flotilla of US ships sits there, menaces, and Maduro just says, no, I'm not going?
We will continue to fight.
Yeah?
As we have, we will continue to fight. I spent 7 years in prison. Venezuelans have been killed because of this fight. Venezuelans are still in prison. 10 million Venezuelans have been forced into exile, and we will not lose hope. We will continue to fight in every terrain with one hope. We want Venezuela to be free, and we will continue to fight because it is our right to be free. It is our sovereign right to have a democracy, and we will continue to fight. And so nobody can take us out of that dream of being free. And I find it very interesting that we see people from democratic countries questioning our will to be free.
Right. Just on a final word, just tell me where you were and what you thought when you heard about this American flotilla heading for Venezuela. What went through your mind?
Well, it went through my mind that it was the correct framing of the problem that we are having in Venezuela, because in 2014, I was sent to 7 years in prison, sentenced to 14 years of imprisonment for saying what is precisely being said today, that Maduro is the head of a narco-terrorist criminal structure that has hijacked and taken over the Venezuelan state.
Good talking to you. Thank you so much for
thank
joining
you very
us. Leopoldo Lopez is a Venezuelan opposition leader.
Thank you very much.
Let's pick this up with Christopher Sabatini, who is a senior research fellow for Latin America at the Chatham House International Affairs think tank in London. Welcome to DW. So we have Nicolas Maduro accusing Donald Trump of fabricating a war to remove him from power. Is that what this looks like to you?
Well, what it looks like, first of all, is Nicolas Maduro is a illegitimate leader. That certainly is true. He stole the elections according to credible accounts last year. It is true also that he and his government have been involved in illicit activities. But what is really at work here is Donald Trump is trying to trigger some sort of palace coup, if you will, or defection by the military for a regime change. He's ramped up from basically the end of August until now, slowly, starting with 6 ships and about 5,000 or 4,000 naval personnel. And then he added more, up to 10 ships. And now, as your report just demonstrated, with the USS Gerald Ford, the largest aircraft carrier in the U.S. fleet, he's doubling down on this effort to try to engage in what I refer to as regime change on the cheap, trying to trigger insecurity within the military that it will basically remove Nicolas Maduro and engage in some sort of regime that is more to the United States' liking, and also, one would hope, less criminal, less repressive, and more open to the opposition. But that hasn't happened yet. And so now we're entering this phase in which there's so many assets built up. There are 10,500 military personnel now off the coast, or soon with the arrival of the USS Gerald Ford off the coast of Venezuela. We're talking dozens of bombers and dozens of missiles and drones, amphibious craft that could land special ops troops. It does seem that at this point, at this level of escalation, absent any sort of miraculous regime change that Donald Trump is seeking, it could come to some more kinetic actions, probably not an invasion, but kinetic actions and attacks within Venezuela. So yes, this is about removing the Maduro government. That's certainly been true. Many of the claims of narcotics trafficking and the boats that have been carrying the drugs that were taken out by missiles have been completely false, or at least unproven by the Trump administration. This is, again, regime change on the cheap.
Okay, this from a president elected on a platform of no more wars. But it also seems, so many things these days seem unthinkable, but it seems unthinkable that America just gets to decide, well, first of all, we'll just kill lots of people that we don't like without due process. We're trying to change a regime, and then someone's going to, at some stage, the bluff will end up being called. You don't just throw bombs at another country for no good reason and accuse them of drug trafficking, do you?
There's an easy answer to that, which is no, you don't. But I am equally surprised. I've studied and lived in the region now for 30 years. I'm surprised it's gotten to this point. But let's understand also the domestic politics of this. As you mentioned, Donald Trump campaigned in 2016 against forever wars. And I think in his gut, he is against committing U.S. troops. I think he is, and the risks, the political as well as personal, that are involved in that. But what happened was in Trump 1 was he attempted regime change by supporting an interim president, the then president of the National Assembly, Juan Guaido. And there was a whole series of insurrections and popular mobilizations in the country. And the Trump administration convinced more than 50 governments to recognize Juan Guaido as a legitimate president. It failed to provoke regime change. This even after Donald Trump welcomed Juan Guaido in his State of the Union address and saluted him to the audience as the legitimate president of Venezuela. So for Donald Trump, this is also personal. But during the campaign in 2024, he also made the Maduro government a target of his campaign against immigration. He talked about how Venezuelan immigrants had taken over a town, a criminal network of immigrants had taken over a town in Colorado. He talked about how Nicolas Maduro was emptying his jails and his mental institutions to send undocumented immigrants to the United States. For him now, this is personal. I'm not justifying what he does, but there is the domestic aspect.
But can we get a brief word then about the response to this Washington build-up from Washington's allies in Latin America? Briefly, if you wouldn't mind.
Well, the truth is most of them have remained silent. According to public opinion surveys, actually many Latin Americans actually would support military action by the United States to remove Maduro, because the region has become flooded with Venezuelan refugees. More than 8 million Venezuelan refugees have left. Right. But quite frankly, with the exception of Trinidad and Tobago, most of the governments have remained completely mute on this entire issue. And the president of Colombia has come out and spoken out against it. And of course, there are now claims that the United Kingdom is going to stop sharing intelligence with the Trump administration in the Caribbean, precisely because it has severe doubts about the appropriateness or the legality of what it's doing.
We're going to have to leave it there. Christopher Sabatini from Chatham House, thank you so much.